Today here with me in the European Parliament is the President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you for having me.
And congratulations for being there, for being in Ukraine.
Yeah, this was a difficult decision, but one that had to be taken. We have a responsibility as political representatives, as leaders in a very difficult time, that we need to take the plunge and meet with the people and look in the eyes of our brothers and sisters in Ukraine who are fighting a war in Europe for us.
You are the European leader that went there for the first one after some prime ministers. We know this. How difficult was for you to take this decision, and were you afraid on the road?
For me, it was not difficult in the sense that I knew that this needed to happen. How it happened took a lot of course, preparation, which had to be done very quickly. But we had very good cooperation with the other institutions, with the representatives of the European Union in Kiev, with different governments that came together, the Polish government in particular, in Poland, in order for me to be given the transport until the border, until when we went by train to Kiev. We were also very well taken care of by our Ukrainian counterparts in an amazing situation where I was given the honor and the privilege to address the Ukrainian Rada.
We've seen your speech over there. What were you thinking when you were on the road, when you were going there in the middle of the war, actually? What were you thinking of?
Well, I was thinking that this is a moment where Europe needs to stand up to be counted. This was even before we saw the shocking atrocities and the images of what happened in Bucha. This was a moment where I said, President Zelensky has been addressing all the parliaments in the world. Have we done enough? I thought to myself, no, we have not done enough, and I will do my best in the next few hours. It was not even clear how many hours I would stay in Kiev, but also to make sure that my message is as strong as possible, as hopeful as possible, and ultimately as tangible as possible. Our European Parliament has had a very strong relationship with the Verkhovna Rada since 2015. We have equipped them with hardware, security, etc. And we have to expand that partnership, and that's what I also wanted to do. And I must tell you that while when I was on the road, it was difficult to expect what would I see. But when I entered the Verkhovna Rada, you could see hundreds of members of parliament working in the most spirited, courageous, resilient way ever. So when I walked up on the podium, on the lectern to speak, I said, this is great, and I'm so proud to be here.
What was the most impressive thing you've seen over there on the streets, or maybe in the Rada? What is that moment that you keep in mind or in your heart?
In Kiev, the streets were empty. The shops were closed, there were checkpoints, it was difficult to move around, it was risky to move around, we were under very heavy security and protection. But when I saw the faces of the members of the parliament, I really said this was the right thing to do. Later on, I met with the president, I met with President Zelensky, and you could see the face of a courageous warrior, one that will never give up, and one that is convinced, and I am convinced with him, that Ukraine will win this war. But Ukraine needs help. Ukraine needs equipment, it needs financial help, it needs military and humanitarian assistance. These few days are crucial. That was the main message that I got from their eyes, from the way they spoke, and from what they told me. I will never forget the last few moments when I went from Ukraine into Poland, where I looked back and I saw this is a country that I need to come back after the war and visit with my children and my family in order to really see a country that stood up and fought the fight for Europe.
What have you seen in Zelensky's eyes? Power?
Courage.
Courage.
Courage, power, resilience, strength, but also conviction in arguments. You know, I have seen him with such strength address so many parliaments. Tailor-made questions and tailor-made answers. That is the greatest communication that you can have, greatest leadership power that you can have. But when he looked at me and said, this is what we need, and we rely on the European Parliament to help us deliver together with the rest of the European Union, I knew that I could not look him back when I will see him again without having delivered on our promises to help, because that help is urgently needed.
We have to underline something else also. Here in the European Parliament, Zelensky spoken for the first time. It was his first address, and that was thanks to you also. Let's remember that moment.
У нас дуже мотивований народ. Дуже. Ми боремося за наші права, свободу, за життя. А зараз ми боремося за виживання. І це найголовніша наша мотивація. Але ми боремося і за те, щоб бути рівноправними членами Європи. І я вважаю, що сьогодні ми всім показуємо, що ми такі є. З нами Європейський Союз буде точно міцніший. Без вас Україна буде самотня. Ми довели свою силу, довели, що ми, як мінімум, такі самі, як ви. Доведіть, що ви разом з нами, доведіть, що ви нас не відпускаєте, доведіть, що ви дійсно європейці. І тоді життя переможе смерть, а світ – темряву. Слава Україні!
Okay, so how did you do it? How did you make the European Parliament be the first one to hear Zelensky?
Well, that was just 1 week since the invasion.
Exactly.
It was a week where we had already been preparing, because I have spoken to my Ukrainian counterparts and I speak to the Prime Minister very, very often. I speak to the President of the Parliament, the Speaker, Ruslan Stefanchuk, very often, almost on a daily basis. And we had been planning the possibility of linking up. We had been looking into the technical possibilities, and when we saw that there was a technical possibility, then we decided to do it. There was a huge response from this European Parliament, its leadership, and then when you saw the atmosphere in the room, I think that's when members of the European Parliament said, this is the place where leaders can speak to the world. This is a European Parliament that I want to see growing also in the next 2.5 years, less than 2.5 years now, of my mandate, one that is effective, one that does just not only talks, but one that acts as well. So when me and President Zelensky were discussing that possibility and it became a reality, it was an amazing moment for that to happen.
You already managed to change the European Parliament, its attitude, its force of reaction, its speed of reaction. Also, we've seen this in the Ukrainian crisis. Do you think that during your mandate, Ukraine, of course, Moldova and Georgia will become a member of the European Union? Is it possible?
Well, there is huge support in this House for countries that look to Europe as their home, to find a Europe with open arms. This Parliament opened its arms on that day when President Zelensky addressed us, when we welcomed the candidate status of Ukraine and later Georgia and Moldova to the European Union. We will do our part as an institution. There are many things that a country can take in terms of steps that are very open, accessibility for funding, etc., for countries like Ukraine. Now it's my responsibility to make sure that this House remains as effective and efficient as possible in taking the decisions that are needed for the tangible results, both in financial assistance and political assistance, from here in the heart of Europe in Strasbourg to the heart of Europe in Kiev, because that is the heart of Europe. The number of European Union flags that I saw, the number of people who talk to us and say, for us, we look to Europe, we don't want to look anywhere else. It's my role as President of this Parliament to deliver that, but this House is extremely open to making sure that that happens.
Let's look forward together and try to imagine the next 2 years. What can actually go wrong, or who do you think will oppose to this new direction of Ukraine?
Oh, this European Parliament is made up of an enormous amount of dynamic, courageous members that want Europe to move faster, that want Europe to be at the forefront, that look at the digital transition, the green transition, but now security crisis that we are under, and who knows what crisis we will be facing at the moment. You have the feeling that we are going from crisis to crisis, but Europe is born for that moment and is made for that moment. The European Union is a result of a decades-long peace project and has to continue to be like that. So rather than focus on what might go wrong, I can say that this is an institution that is resilient, that can adapt, and that has members that are courageous enough to be able to face up to any situation.
I've listened to you on Monday when you've addressed to your colleagues, when you're telling them what you've seen in Kiev and what do you consider as President of the European Parliament that should be done here in the European Union. So more sanctions and more action coming from the member states in the future, right?
Absolutely. What we need is harder and tougher sanctions. We need to enforce the current packages. We need to make sure that Ukraine has the military equipment that it needs, the humanitarian assistance that it needs also for persons internally displaced. In Ukraine, we don't speak about that enough. We need to thank those member states that have taken so much, such as Romania, in terms of shouldering and sharing this responsibility, even disproportionate responsibility, because that's the courage and the humanity that Europe is showing at its very core. We also need to make sure that the next few days we do not let down Ukraine. Ukraine needs help, and that help needs to come from us. This is not a moment where Europe hopes that someone else in the world will solve a problem that is happening in Europe, on our continent. These are the next few days that are crucial. We look forward to the next package of sanctions. We look forward to better enforcement, and we look forward to seeing more and quicker military equipment getting to Ukraine in order to fight this war against such a brutal invasion and attacker.
What we've seen there, it's horrible. We cannot find the words to describe what's happening over there. You've mentioned Romania, and yes, Romania has a lot of Ukrainians now in shelter, and some of them are only in transit. The Romanians are looking at you right now. In the end of our discussion, what's your message for them?
I tell them that they embody the values of the European Union and Europe with every action that they make. These are difficult moments. There will be difficult weeks and months, if not years ahead, but I look at Romanian citizens with the eyes of immense courage and, let's say, strength of character. That's what I see in my Romanian colleagues here. I see it in you. I see it whenever I meet anyone in Romania who is really shouldering this responsibility with bravery and humanity.
Thank you so much for being with us today, and congratulations again for what you've done.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.